Thank you, David. Freddie, if that's what you can achieve without the 10 steps, then all I can say is, wow, fantastic. Tony, I absolutely agree with you. There's some things I've got up here that I've got a little green tick, but that doesn't mean we're there. And Dan, now I understand why there's so much methamphetamine in Western Australia. So the 10 steps from a St John, New Zealand perspective. I think many of these things, Paul, would also apply to Wellington Free, but I need to say this is from a St John, New Zealand perspective, not a New Zealand perspective. So I've given us a green tick for cardiac arrest registry. We're nowhere near as, can I use the word long on the tooth, as Ambulance Victoria in this area. But we've now got longitudinal data going back to 2013. We've now been annually publishing since 2014. Clearly, we've got a long way to go. And I think the next step for us is measuring functional outcome at 12 months. This is not something we're doing, but it is something we're talking about, and probably the resource allocation is not as big as we might have initially thought. And I think this is probably the next step for us, is to start regularly measuring and reporting on functional outcome at 12 months. Telephone CPR and quality improvement, I've given ourselves a kind of 50-50 dash on that. So we are performing and providing telephone CPR. We've got no idea how good we are. We're not measuring it. We're not measuring time to hands on chest. We're not regularly reviewing each call. We're not regularly reviewing the ones we missed and thinking, why did we miss that? Why did we not identify that call as involving cardiac arrest? And for us, this is, in terms of the calls to where we think it's cardiac arrest, it's probably about 14 a day. Of those 14, about 5 a day are truly in cardiac arrest. So this is not an insignificant piece of work, but it is the next step in this area for us. And Paul, I think probably we should do this together. For those of you who don't know, we've got 3 ambulance communication centres taking calls for 2 ambulance services, and we share them. So I think this is something we should do in conjunction. High performance CPR, I've given us a dash. We're well into the planning phase. We're not yet into the implementation phase, although we will be, I think, in approximately 3 to 6 months. We will then have to implement this across around 3,500 ambulance personnel and around 5,500 fire personnel. That's including our volunteers across New Zealand. So implementation is not going to be simple, but I do feel, what's the right word? I feel encouraged by the fact that everybody, when I asked the question, are you prepared to get round the table and develop a single system for New Zealand, everybody put their hand up. 2 ambulance services, 1 fire service, 2 universities. So we've got a real opportunity, given our size, we've got a real opportunity to have one single model of high performance CPR in the country in the future. And that's something I'm really looking forward to. I've given us a tick on rapid dispatch, but we've got a good process and system for rapid dispatch, and we've got a good process for measuring it, so we can measure our time from call through to dispatch queue and from dispatch queue through to dispatch for our purples, but we're not measuring the ones that we didn't recognise as cardiac arrest, and we are not providing feedback to the dispatchers. So one of the things that we are starting to talk about is actually sitting down with each dispatcher and saying, okay, so the job came in, this is what you had available to you at the time, this is what was dispatched, but there was a manager there. You missed them. How did that happen? How did we miss the fact that there was a manager close by who wasn't dispatched? So we've still got some work to do in this area. Measure resuscitation performance. Unfortunately for us, this is a big red cross. We are currently doing nothing in this area. It is, when we looked at the 10 steps, it's one of the ones that we put to the bottom of our priority list, not because we didn't want to do it, but because the implications of what we need to do to make this work are very significant. Made more complicated for us by the fact we've still got a mixed defibrillator fleet, and that makes the challenges of, makes downloading that information and feeding it back to crews additionally challenging. But this is an area that we have earmarked for the future. I think it's probably going to be still a little way away for us, to be honest. First responder programs, I think this is an area that we have done reasonably well, particularly with our fire service, but also throughout St John we have a number of community first response groups who will carry a pager and respond to the scene in their own cars. So they've got kits and AEDs, and they'll respond to the scene in their own cars. We don't necessarily provide them with a vehicle to respond in. And this is one of our community first response groups who just finished their training in rural New Zealand. And you'll note the predominance of women. And we have a lot of women in our first response groups throughout New Zealand. We've done reasonably well, in fact I think we've done really well with fire in New Zealand, so we've now got an absolute commitment from fire to respond to every single purple, because our goal is to get us both there to cardiac arrest. And as Dan said earlier, previously we had excluded some patients, like you're in a medical centre. I look back and I go, why did we do that? Medical centres almost never deal with cardiac arrest. And when we get there, it's a complete shambles. So if we get fire there, at least we know they're going to get really good CPR. We've got some work to do in this area with police, and I think that for us is going to be particularly challenging, but I think that's next cab off the rank. Smart technology, well, we've talked about Good Sam, we won't go back into that. Early days for us, we've only been running since April. We kind of forget we haven't been running all that long, but it's looking good, and I think there are some things we can do outside of cardiac arrest with Good Sam that are quite promising. And in New Zealand at the moment, we're not differentiating between metropolitan and rural. There's a little CAD IT hiccup that we had, but we're going to fix that, and then we will be able to do what Victoria are doing, and that's have a different response distance, radius, for patients that are in a metropolitan setting versus a rural setting. AEDs and CPR in schools, I've given us a dash. We're doing this, but we're not doing it in a systematic way. I've got a feeling, and I could be totally wrong on this, that the schools that put their hands up to say, we want this, may not be the schools at which we're looking at and saying, you need this. It requires the school to put their hand up. It requires us to be able to have the resources to send people in. And as we discussed before, I think we need to make this longitudinally, we need to make this compulsory in the curriculum in such a way that it's embedded, and then it just happens and we don't have to be running it. I think that's the future. Accountable, so we currently publish our cardiac arrest data annually. We publish it to the public. It's on our website. Anybody can go in there and take a look at it. I concur with Tony's thoughts earlier. This is a 25-page document. There is a summary couple of pages at the front, but we probably could make it just a little bit more user-friendly for the public, and just perhaps have a 2 or 3 page document that the public could open up, and it would clearly, in diagrammatic format, show them what it is that they want to know. Culture of excellence, I gave us a dash. I think we've got a culture of excellence in the people who are part of the teams that are driving this. I'm still not confident that and I always hesitate when I use this term, the average paramedic in small town New Zealand, I'm still not sure has their head around what we mean by a culture of excellence, and I think we've got quite a long way to go before we get there, but that is absolutely our goal. So thank you very much.